Let's take like all the competitors during the Olympics, and when they do their event, have one more slot for someone who's average. And then you would see really quick that there's such a difference between elite, whether it's athletic or basketball quality, and not elite.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to another Good Drill Pod. I am Andrew Combo Salad. We have Bobby in the building. We have Ross in the building. And joining us today is Cory Schlesinger, who is the executive director of performance for the Detroit Pistons. Don't forget to subscribe to the Good Drill Pod.
And this episode of the Good Drill Podcast is powered by the Good Drill app. On the Good Drill app, we're going to tell you everything you need to know to jump higher, dunk, dominate the game, become insanely skilled. Go. It's in the link below.
Cory, how are things, man?
Oh, phenomenal. Gentlemen, thank you guys for having me on. This is awesome.
For sure. Bobby's going to kick things off here today.
So, Cory, I know at one point in your career you were invited to a symposium of sorts where you had to get up and present with a whole bunch of other coaches. And to my understanding, you got up there and said, "My name is Cory. What I do is not that important." Can you bring us back there?
Yeah, this is like the anti-string coach. So essentially what happened, it was at the time, it was the Mamba Sports Academy symposium. So it was their first ever deal with the Kobe athletic conference. And so it was really cool. They had a panel of 10 string coaches and everybody had the same question. So they had this panel, they asked the question, everyone went down the line. And there was, I would consider heavy hitters. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be interesting. And of course, I got one guy, I won't say his name, but I got one guy who is very much on the inspiring, motivational kick niche in our industry. And he gets up, and I kid you not, he had a prepared monologue about how important our profession is. And I kid you not, he got a standing ovation. And I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to follow that up? And as soon as he sat down, I'm like, all right, just answer as truthfully as possible. And so after he promotes the profession and why it's so needed and all these glorious things about strength and conditioning, I got up and I said, I think in 10 years' time, we all should be replaced. And you can just hear a pin drop in that place. And I opened up the dialogue to say, if skill coaches understood a little bit about GPP, we are now not the experts in the room. And a few people in the crowd, you could see like a light bulb went off and they got it. But everyone else, man, it was almost riots. It wasn't that good for me, I'll tell you that.
Could you get into GPP? So there might be skills coaches out there, basketball players listening that don't know what GPP is. But if you could equip a basketball skills trainer with a background or some type of comprehensive knowledge in GPP, what does that look like?
Yeah, for sure. The term is general physical preparation, right? And if we're trying to make the best athletes we can possibly make, it generally starts with the basement and things that you should have got in physical education class. But in Western society, our physical education curriculum has suffered tremendously. So we really don't raise athletes anymore. We raise kids who play sports. And so for us, it's just, can you do basic fundamental movements really well, repeat competency, and then if you get to a certain level, you just progressively overload it. And for me, I don't think it's that hard of a concept. The more and more I'm in the field, the more I realize it's more about the timing and the execution is where most people lack because they don't understand the environment too well.
So throughout your journey, you've made a lot of pit stops. What were some of your biggest aha moments throughout the course of time?
Oof. Yeah, a lot of good ones here. I'll say as an intern, I played college basketball. Don't look at my stats. I was terrible. But when I looked across the field, I realized, well, if I want to do college basketball, I need to look at what these people are doing. And the thing that I realized was none of these dudes hooped. Like, none of them. So back when I started, it was truly just football string coaches who couldn't make it in SEC football and get that one big paying job, right, in Power 5. So then they would just do the next thing, which the next revenue sport is, of course, basketball. And so then there's this culture clash of what football strength coaches think hoopers should do, and there really wasn't much in between. I mean, it was basically an all or nothing phenomenon on what you were getting. And so I thought that was pretty fascinating, where I'm like, well, I mean, how am I supposed to compete with a football strength coach? Because in my head that time, I'm like, well, football strength coaches, they get paid the most, so they're the most valued. And college basketball coaches were also like, yeah, we need our guys tougher, so the football strength coach makes sense, right? And then I started realizing, I'm like, well, I guess they don't understand the skill acquisition aspect. Like, if I bench press heavy and go into a skill session or do high volume upper body and go shoot, it generally doesn't go too well. Like, just blasted GTOs and muscle spindles and all this fun stuff that helps me with fluidity, and we can get into the weeds on that. But it's just like the timing, the execution, like it just didn't make sense. So my first aha moment was there was none of me in the space that I wanted to be. And so how I tried to navigate that was just doubling down on being a basketball guy. And that was probably my aha moment number one. Other places, trying to think, Santa Clara, that was my first actual gig. I was 23 years old, and ironically, I wasn't prepared for this, but I became a director at a Division I school. So I went from intern to director. And it was mainly because I had a high pedigree of internships, and I had a lot of, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this without sounding too offensive, but the lack of education or the lack of knowledge for someone to hire someone like me for that kind of role. And so I failed tremendously, like a ton. But the one thing that I found was the higher level that I went from Santa Clara to UAB to Stanford, the higher level athlete I got, the more general physical preparation they needed, the less specific work that I thought I needed to apply to them. And I thought that was really fascinating because you got the better athletes, right? And the thing is, they just specialized a lot earlier. And when they specialized earlier, they just need to come back to the very, very simple fundamental movements or progressive overload. And probably my biggest, since we're talking about resistance training, was my transition from University of Alabama, Birmingham to Stanford University. And this one's the one that changed a lot. Was I was a huge Olympic lifting advocate. I mean, we cleaned, we snatched, we jerked. I mean, it's at Santa Clara and at UAB. I mean, my joint looked like a weightlifting hall. And that's how I became popular in the space, was because I had 7-footers looking like they belonged in a weightlifting hall. I mean, the technical aspect of their lifts was just, I mean, chef's kiss. It was amazing. But I don't necessarily think it made him a better basketball player. So when I got to Stanford, I had access to force plates for the first time in my career. And I started seeing these older athletes who are already technically proficient, and we're getting them bigger, faster, stronger, and they're adding more load to their cleans, and they're adding more load to their squats, and they're pulling heavier weights, and their force plate numbers never changed. If anything, they actually dulled down. Their reactive strength index, or their RSI, the ability to create force faster, was actually taking longer to achieve their prior results, or if I gained another quarter inch on their jump. And so it took me a long time to sit back and reflect on everything that I thought I knew about Olympic lifting and how it applied to what I was doing with the athletes. And I came to the conclusion that they were just getting better at executing the skill of the lift, not necessarily of executing the ability to put force through the floor. And that's when I was like, oh. And back in 2017, that's where all those trap bar variations came from. My little nook at Stanford University, we just replaced the straight barbell with a trap bar. And we did the same idea, right? You still do your pulls, clean pulls, jump shrugs, all the things that you would see in an Olympic lifting progression. We just did the same, but with a trap bar. Now, obviously, we didn't clean and catch a trap bar because you'd decapitate yourself. But we had the similar principles of pull and catch. And all of a sudden, guys are adding 40 to 50 more kilos, I kid you not, kilos, to their overall load. And then all of a sudden, their force plate numbers are skyrocketing. And I was like, man, that was probably my biggest aha moment on the strength side.
Are you able to get, so that was back in college, in your current capacity as an NBA strength coach, are you able to get these same metrics, and do you still pay attention to these same metrics? So you made that change from Olympic lifting to the trap bar variations. Are you still going through that same process with the NBA guys?
Yeah, we don't necessarily go Olympic lifting to trap bar.
No, I didn't mean that. I meant you were getting numbers back on that. You saw the feedback, you got the metrics, and then you made a change and saw the big jump in the force plate numbers. Are you still doing that now?
Yeah, for sure. The thing that you find the most is there's different ways of creating stressors to the body to elicit adaptations, right? So we think of if you lift heavy, then you'll be able to get out of the hole faster. And I would argue, well, the strongest stimulus you could possibly give to the body is a failed deadlift. And so where I'm going with this is an overcoming isometric. So then we're talking about the ability of just magnitude, like how much force can I create? Do I need skill to do that? Do I need a lift to help me be skillful to achieve that task? I don't think so. You just strap a bar into a rack and rip as hard as you can, and you're creating that magnitude. You're creating the overall stressor. And so what I've done, if I've done anything, is I've stripped down the skill of lifting, and I've got it through easier means. I utilize a lot of machines and using the force plates and using a lot of other different technologies we have access to from a load management standpoint. We look at and how do we influence them to be able to produce the most force or feel the best that they can possibly feel to create the most force in a controlled environment, which will make me feel like as long as I'm pushing the overall theme, that if we microdose this correctly, at the end of the season, they should be producing the most force with the most fluidity and feeling their best at the end of the year opposed to the beginning of the year.
You mentioned microdosing, and I heard Pavel speaking recently how we have a cramming model here in the States when it comes to exercise. Do you believe not only basketball players, because in the NBA you realize you had to microdose because of how many games being played, do you believe all humans should microdose? And for those that don't know, what is microdosing?
Yeah, we'll just start with the idea of microdosing. I always like to talk about this more as like an example, more so than anything. So most traditional lifting models, whether you're general population or specific in sports, they always do what, 2 to 3 times a week. You lift weights. Cool.
Right.
And then those would be considered probably anywhere between an hour to an hour and a half long sessions to get all your exercises in, right? And then you start this whole concept of you got the warm up, then you got your speed, your power, your strength, and then your bodybuilding or accessory work. That's generally the line of how these longer sessions go. And what I started realizing was, especially in college when we did that, we would overreach, and that's great. But what happened was they would have residual effects from that. And so in other words, they would stay sore. And once I started really appreciating the basketball side and watching the skill sessions and trying to get my hands a little dirty in the technical aspect of the sport, I started realizing I'm probably making those sessions worse because of the magnitude of my sessions. And so this idea of microdosing was, instead of doing 2 to 3 sessions where we hit every one of those variables, let's just take each one of those variables and spread it out strategically throughout the week. So in other words, it's really simple. It's just high frequency training. So we just, anytime our hands touch a basketball, our hands touch iron. It was a term that I used back in the day. So essentially we lifted every day, and we did it in these smaller bites to where I could actually get more intensity and I can get more skill acquisition from the things I was trying to accomplish on the performance side, because we were having more opportunities. And I think that's where, especially if you look at the motor learning research, it's not necessarily about getting the overall reps in a week. Like, here's a good way of putting it. Let's get 1,000 shots in 2 days. Or we can get 500 shots and we can sprinkle it out morning, afternoon. And then it allows my body to recover and be able to have higher intent and higher execution. That's a gross example, but just showing you how we want to just spread out those dosages. And then if you strategically use them correctly, you'll actually have what we consider potentiation, or open up the window for more opportunity for motor learning to take place. And so that's where I'm digging in the weeds now.
I think that idea is not dissimilar if you were to just zoom in on skill by itself. We're not just in the gym for an hour doing one thing for the most part. And these are all different things, but we can easily do that, right? And those things aren't as well monitored and objectified as something like strength and conditioning, right? So it's like we can go do distance layups, and if we just did that for an hour, that's way different skill work than doing, all right, let's just get up shots, but it's still skill work. And like that idea, I think like that happens naturally when it comes to, if I'm on the court with a player, it's, okay, you're done here. It's time to move on. What you've done is you're saying, okay, this is an outline that we can kind of plan out way ahead of time to ensure that by the end of the season, you're at your best, feeling your best.
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing that you said I thought was pretty interesting, and I put this back on the skill coaches, because once again, like I've been beating down the strength coaches forever. Right? Now to put it back on the skill coaches, let's say you did an hour long of long distance lays, right? Well, physically, what is that doing to the body, right? That is you got to get up to speed. So we're talking about Excel, right? Then you're going to jump off of one leg for a long distance. So we'll consider that a triple jump or a broad jump. So I would say from a physical standpoint, that's probably what I consider a pretty high stressor, especially for the posterior chain. Now imagine skill sessions that run into like a similar fashion where they don't understand the demands of the drill physically on the body and how that could have a cascading effect, whether it's negative or positive. I think a better understanding of just stress in general and basic anatomy and physiology for skill coaches will give you the ability to have way better skill sessions. And that's, I think, an area where we can combine and actually collaborate, whether you want to learn that side or not. But then there's this universal language. At some point, we have to cross the Rubicon where strength coaches got to be, a little bit savvy on the basketball side. And then basketball coaches, hey, man, it'd be cool if you learned a little bit about the anatomy of the body and how high days are high, low days are low, and why we do this. And anyways, I know I went off on a tangent, but I thought that was a really, really good example.
No, we saw it last year. I'm not going to say anybody's name, but me and Bobby in the gym, we have somebody else in the gym working with players. It's me and Bobby are next to each other, giving like a weird look to what's going on. And it's just that not everybody has that eye. And we're not special by any means, but it's like we have an eye. I have a doctorate. He has has years of looking at all these things, right? You have an eye of like, you know what, like maybe a lot of stress, but borderline not even safe of what you're doing. And not everybody has that eye. They don't have that. It takes time to learn the eye, to look at movement, to look at stress, to even look at body language of the player of like, you need to move on or you need to dial this back. I 100% agree with that. You need to have an eye for movement because at some point it's going to come into play if you're a skill coach. 100%.
For sure. I mean, I think track and field is the best place to look at for that, because what was cool about track and field back in the day was the track coach or the sprint coach was the everything coach. He was the dietitian. He was the massage therapist. He was the strength and conditioning coach. And of course, he was the sprint coach, the technical coach. And so having to put your hands into these different bowls will allow you to have a better holistic understanding of movement and of stress, response, adaptation. And that's what I find fascinating about our field is we're becoming even more siloed. So it's not necessarily saying that we're not getting more research, we're not getting more understanding, but because we're so siloed, do we actually communicate it well? So it's not necessarily do we have everything understood from the physical side, it's how well do we communicate that to the athlete. And then now that everybody has 3 or 4 people in their camp to help them develop, how is the communication going to allow that to not contradict each other, but to complement each other?
Yeah, I'm now remembering what I lost my train of thought on 15 minutes ago, whenever that was. But it was you saying that it's really not that difficult of a process for somebody in the skill acquisition side to get a working knowledge of the strength development side. And to take that a step further, I think it's like the glaringly obvious thing that should be done in the industry, the same way that your first aha moment was, I'm going to get entrenched in this basketball side. That's what I did 12 years ago, whenever it was like, I want to train basketball players. What does that mean? Like, what do basketball players need? Well, they need to be athletic, right? They need to jump. They need to be able to shoot. They need all the skills. They need to have the decision-making capability. They need all these things. And that was my niche, was the basketball player. But previous to that, going back, it was like you had skill guys that worked on footwork and putting the ball through your legs and shooting mechanics. Then you had your football strength coaches that were going to get you bigger, faster, stronger. And it became two obvious things, but it's one thing. It's a basketball player. And why can't we get people like yourself or other people involved with developing that complete unit rather than siloing to different aspects? And I just love having guys like you on here because you're doing it at the highest level. And I want to bring that to a question of how much, like, do you see this transition happening at the highest level? Do you have more communication with the guys on the skill acquisition, or are you brought into conversations regarding skill acquisition, even though you are our strength coach?
Man, that's a great question. To put it back, I would say this is why youth, generally everything stays, because they're so young that they just respond really fast and they adapt really, really, really fast. So then no one knows really who's doing a good job. All right. Oh man, they got bigger and they're shooting the ball better. Well, they concurrently rose, like, was it all tides rise the boats or whatever? Like when you're young, and especially, and even in college, you can concurrently tap every single one of these and they all rise to a certain degree. But once you get to a higher level with older athletes, that's when you start seeing, oh, wow, like this session directly affects that session, because all boats don't rise the older you get and the more skillful you become, because then you can see how certain sessions actually dampen the touch, the feet. Like once you have an eye for it, and you're like, yeah, we did. Let's use the example of a heavy bench press session before they go into some skill work. You look and you're like, man, they're having to get a lot more like rhythm shots in than they typically do. And it's like, yeah, because they don't have that feel, they don't have that touch, and they don't have that flick. It's like, Cory, you dampened my senses, and you can see that. And you can but just think about, okay, yeah, that's from the arms, but like imagine the legs. You smoke the legs before they go into their session. I mean, you already know what that's going to look like. And now at the highest level, I mean, we have an army of staff. And this is where, back to what I was talking about, we do it really well because we work with each other every day and we have a common goal, and we're paid by an organization or by an entity to help us get the best out of that athlete. And on the other side, it's actually the opposite. Like at the younger levels, I don't know how well it gets communicated from the parent to the skill coach, to the high school strength coach, to the PE teacher, to the high school basketball coach. Like how well does that unit work? I mean, it can't be that great compared to what we have in a professional setting. And so for us, it's absolutely critical. It's crucial. And because of newer and newer technologies, we actually get to objectively measure every one of these spaces, and then we can have dialogue. It's so much harder at a younger level to have this kind of dialogue without subjectivity and without a feeling. And it only goes so far. But when you have so much objectivity, it makes it pretty clear, pretty quick. And then we can get to right really fast.
How do you approach your job at the college level compared to the NBA level?
Oof. So I did this weird, what's it called, hopscotch, or when you jump in and jump out, you know what I'm talking about, the jump roping deal.
Right.
So I spent most of my career in college, and I've been on a ton of podcasts, especially early in my career. And the thing that I said all the time was I had no ambitions for the NBA whatsoever. I mean, the NBA was a lot, like they don't train, they don't this. And that was like Super Meathead Slash was a fun guy. I liked him a lot. I miss him sometimes, but I cared so much about the the strength conditioning aspect. And then the stars were in alignment for me to go to an NBA team. And so that's where I had 4 years with the Phoenix Suns. And that is where, I mean, it was not even 6 months in, every light bulb went off for me, and starting to realize how fickle it can be and how much stress that these athletes go under, whether it's travel, play, social. And then you're trying to, be the strength coach, and then you're watching the skill coach, and then you're watching them trying to earn a contract, and then all the other things that go with it. And you start realizing, how do I chase minimum effective dosage? And I know that's like a pie in the sky scenario, but that's what you're really trying to do. How do I chip away at this block without cracking it. And that's where, the microdosing really came from. Started at Stanford because it made sense for that environment, but it made the most sense in the NBA. And so after my 4 years with the Suns, then I wanted to go back into college basketball because I found, once again, a stars in alignment scenario to where I get to get on the basketball side a little bit and I get to be involved with player development. And so it would be the first of its kind where you actually have this blend. And I'm like, man, I can really do this thing. And then life happens, and my beautiful wife, we have our daughter, and the Detroit Pistons called, and here I am in my wife's hometown with 30 family members. And so I had to pivot and come back to the space. So dipping in and out, I have a greater appreciation for skill, but seeing it in college, what I would do different in college is I would have better relationships with basketball coaches and truly just double down on education. Because what I found is you know what you know. And there's nothing more rooted in tradition than college basketball. College basketball has so much tradition. And the tradition is in preseason, you beat the brakes off these guys because you're trying to build this capacity. And once again, they're young and athletic and a little bit, robust. So they're able to withstand it. But then you just see the decline, right? And that's the one thing that is like less is more in college basketball, even though no coach can hear that message. And I get the pressure of being a head basketball coach in college, but truly, man, you start seeing the traditions of college basketball and you're like, well, and I hear the terms of, we did this, back in, 20 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, and basketball has changed significantly in 20 years. So is every bit of research that points in the direction of the exact opposite of what we're talking about. But it's doubling down on education on the basketball side. That's what I would do more than anything if I went back into college basketball.
20 years from today, what looks crazy?
It's nuts, man. I mean, NIL, that's his own thing, right? But as far as the structure of the kids going to class, competing in practice, it's a practice-based model. So most of your stress actually comes from practice. And when you break down the data for most teams, you'll see that the practices are almost double the volume and intensity than the games. And you think two ways. All right. One is, yeah, it makes sense because they're underdeveloped. Right? They don't have the IQ and they need the volume for the rep standpoint. And then at the same time, they are young. So then the strength coaches are trying to get the pressure. Hey, he needs to gain 20 pounds in a year. And you're like, okay, so I'm also doing that. And then their rest days, statistically, are actually game days. And you go, sounds kind of the exact opposite of what we really want out of this situation. Like, we want our Ferraris to race on race day, not turn them into Honda Civics on race day. Because once you just start peeling back all this volume, well, then now you got a daily driver. You don't have a race car anymore. And that's what I see in college basketball more than anything. So the thing that I would going back to the education piece is not everybody have access to this. So there's ways that you can do, like you can simplify these ideas so you can track volume and load management, even with just a pen and paper and a stopwatch. There's so many things that you can do that if you just have a little bit of an understanding, or you can reach out to higher level sports scientists who understand this, you'll have a framework of what a high day looks like, what a low day looks like, and just take some of these simple metrics that will allow you to capture 80% of the work. The other 20% robustness, youth, that can handle most of that. But if you can get a hold of 80%, man, I think you would get more skill. You'd get more speed, power, strength, hypertrophy, all this. And then, of course, you'll get better results. But what you generally see is, kids go to college and they go through the meat grinder. And it's funny because here's a great one. Sorry, I know I'm going on a tangent. The thing that I heard in college the most was, man, back in high school, I had bounce. I'm like, what? Yeah, man, high school, I had way more bounce than I have in college. And dude, from a physical standpoint, that should be the exact opposite.
Right.
because we have all these resources. We have strength and conditioning, we have sports science, we have nutrition. They get 4 meals a day, they get all this stuff. But yet, what does that tell you? It tells you one thing: it's volume. Volume of work has increased so much that they're not even close to the best version of themselves from an output standpoint. So what does that tell you? And a lot of people can't hear that message.
So, you're an NBA strength coach. You're at the top. The number one piece of advice for any young hooper, talking like 13 to 15 years old, starting off in the weight room.
Number one piece of advice starting off in the weight room for a young hooper. Plyometrics is everything. The younger you can start a good plyometric progression, the more it's going to yield in your future. And so I think the ability to truly learn how to sprint. I'm not talking about sprinting on a basketball court. I'm talking about track and field. I'm talking about getting out in space. I'm talking about flight phase. The more that you can develop these higher velocities and motor coordination outside of basketball, I think will help you pay unbelievable dividends inside of basketball. And so that's where I always go back to some really simple fundamental things of you can start your off season off with tempos on a football field where you're running 50 from sideline to sideline, where you're just building up capacity. But then the ability to truly sprint at top speed, I think a lot of people don't understand the cascading values that come from that. And you want to talk about hip development, you want to talk about foot and ankle development. I mean, it's like you're trying to build the biggest engine you can possibly build before you start building all these other things, like the chassis, the armor, the bells and whistles. Like, I think that's where people get confused on, like, build your engine and that will build your suspension. I think everybody does the exact opposite. They try to build their suspension to maintain their engine. There's only a few athletes in the world where I'd go at a young age, hey, just worry about their suspension because they're already touching the top of the backboard. But for 99% of the rest of y'all, track and field, being able to sprint at top speed, and then on the other opposite end of the spectrum, just basic calisthenics. Like, how many pull-ups, push-ups, walking lunges, like how can you execute that at a high level? Once you're able to hit in the 20s and the 30s on that, then it's just progressive overload. Okay, you add a body weight vest. Then you add a couple of plates in your hand or a dumbbell. Then you add a kettlebell. As far as the complexity of the exercises you need to do, absolutely not. Get out of there. Like, whatever you see on YouTube or whatever you see NBA guys doing on the sideline pregame, don't do that stuff. Okay, that is very specific for a very 1% reason compared to all of the other gifts that you still got to go get. So I would say for a youth athlete, starting off, like, getting your ability to truly sprint at top speed. And then we can include jumping with that. And then just progressive overload, but starting with calisthenics first.
And it's funny because when you got those hungry kids that come in and they just want to go work and nobody really gets in their way, what do they start with? I do my push-ups every night. I do my sit-ups every night. I try to get my pull-ups done. Oh, I can't. I do eccentric pull-ups, whatever. They don't say eccentric. They go play. They go they're playing a bunch of different sports. Like, they don't start with, all right, let me go move weight around and the weight room is a good place to do that. No. They go, what do I want to go do? And, I want to be good at basketball. I should be strong. Let me go freaking nail some push-ups.
Mm-hmm.
I get hundreds, if not thousands, of DMs every single day at this point. Give me a good lower body workout. Sprint and jump. Well, what do you mean? I mean, sprint and jump. No, but like, I need a lower body workout. I said, yeah, go sprint and jump. Oh, what about an upper body workout? Push-ups and pull-ups. How many can you do? None. Yeah, do more. Like, that's it.
More.
Like, initially, that's going to get you in the top, I don't know, 10, 20%, right? Go sprint, jump, push-ups, pull-ups, religiously, obsessively, progressing, whatever.
Progressive overload.
Progressive overload that. like that's going to get you in the top 10%. And then you can worry about that 10% when you get there. But most of these kids, young athletes, are not going to do what it takes. That first, like, get that done. Go sprint and jump and get really good at that. And that's it.
You know what's tough is
Low-hanging fruit.
yes.
You,
Yes.
what you talked about, the first thing you talked about was sprinting and really learn how to sprint. Is there more to it than going out and sprinting, or how do you really learn to sprint?
Yeah, I mean, that's where there's some expertise that would be beneficial, right? But I think most, like if you're in a decent high school track and field situation, you'll knock out 90% of what you probably need to do to sprint up to your speed, up to that time. Sure, there's YouTube videos. I would say get away from the drills. I mean, probably the same that you guys believe as far as skill acquisition. Like doing all the A skips, B skips, all that doesn't really transfer to sprinting, in my opinion. Just actually sprinting and doing what I would call constraint-based sprinting. So imagine just sprinting at high speed, like you guys show, like just going tweens, like you're in this unbelievably compromised position where your lumbar flexion, you got unbelievable hinge, and then you're casting your shin out so far, and then you're running as fast as you can while taking the ball between your legs and just passing it through like, you're like a warm-up drill. But people don't understand the value of that. I use that a lot at the highest level. I think it's one of the best drills that you can possibly do to prepare the hamstrings at high velocity, because those are the angles that these guys actually go when they're trying to get around somebody. And those are the shapes and positions they get into to do that. So from a protective standpoint, some of this constraint-based sprinting, which in other words, in this case, using a ball, going between the legs, the rule is you got to go between every step you take. You got to really cast that shin out. And then going something a little bit more simple, just hugging the basketball. So hug a basketball and sprint as fast as you can. Bring the ball out in front of your body, hold it out as far away from you, and sprint as fast as you can. Take the ball, bring it above your head, sprint as fast as you can. And that's all just one vector. Then you can start adding rib and hip disassociation, where you take the basketball, now from hugging to pressing to whatever, now just rotate the body. And now my torso is going to face one direction while my hips are facing the other, and then go maximally speed. And then my favorite that you can get into is now utilizing the curves of the 3-point line or the curves of the track, and now maximally sprint in a curvilinear fashion. I'm telling you, just doing that alone, you are going to develop so much speed, so much coordination, and you're going to develop so much proper stress to the body. And the way that I would say to program it, time your most rested sets. So when you're basically your first 3 to 5, time those. And as soon as you start losing a lot of time, stop. It's as simple as that, or add more rest. We don't need to get more complicated in this, but the constraint-based sprinting, I think, would pay unbelievable dividends, especially at the youth level.
No, I just think, so should these young athletes worry about overtraining? Because I think that's going to be the next question in their head, right? And they're just like, well, I'm scared my knees are going to start hurting, or I'm scared my low back is going to start hurting, or I'm going to be too sore to play. What's your suggestion for young athletes worried about overtraining?
I mean, I think overtraining is more of a lack of preparation than it is necessarily overtraining. So what I mean by that is you guys want to spend so much time in the sport that you don't do enough in the off season to prepare yourself to do more in season. And so that would be my first question to that, or my first answer to that. Secondly, you could always microdose it, right? And anytime you're doing high velocity work, you always do it when you're feeling the freshest, and then you should leave the session feeling like you could go play a basketball game. If you did more than that, you are no longer doing sprint training, you are doing conditioning. There is a difference. So when I do most weight training sessions, especially when it comes to speed, power, and strength, I do a lot of that pre-activity, because it should be potentiating at best, and it shouldn't rip resources away from them to be able to go do their sport. But post-workout, That's the ones where I do, yeah, you probably going to be limping out of here, or you're going to be gassed. And that's where you can get your more high volume, your more local training, or your long duration ISOs. Those are the things you can do post training. But rule of thumb, especially if you're trying to add sprint training, if you feel tired or if you feel like you couldn't play a game after it, you didn't do a good sprint session. You did a good conditioning session.
This is probably my own bro science, but I also feel like hill sprints could teach you a lot about sprinting mechanics without actually telling the athlete what to do.
So I would say, once again, that is another example of a constraint-based sprint, right? The only thing that we changed was the angle of the sprint.
Right.
Now, what's proper about that is it's strength-based sprinting, which is also correlated to acceleration. I love hill sprints. I think they're fantastic. But if we have a lot of skill work with it and we're doing, trying to get around defenders on the court, they're already probably doing a lot of excel work in the sport itself, right? And so that's where I would look at hill sprints as like early off season because there's going to be a lot more ground contact time.
How about microdosing it?
You could, to the fair point, you could technically microdose anything.
Right.
Then you got to get to a level of sophistication of why are you doing it?
Right.
And then that's the thing I was talking about earlier. Physical training is not complicated. Like, not at all. You can get 80% with not that much knowledge, as long as you just have good, like, mechanics. That 20%, though, that's the difference between good and great. Like, that's the difference between, your Charlie Francis as a Verkhoshansky as your, sprint coaches opposed to your college strength coaches, right? Like, there's a huge leap on when to do these activities. Why are you doing these activities? And how is it not going to conflict with the other entities that are going on, rather in that microcycle or that macrocycle? And so that's the difference. Like the coaching eye that you guys talk about, I'm assuming if you're in a skill session and you see it going to hell in a handbasket, once you see sloppy technique or not bad reads and reactions and the guys they're on the floor, then you go, yeah, I need to cut the session, right? Or I need to move on to a different task, something probably simpler, less reads and reactions, less speed and collision, and then you go into something else. Same idea with everything else that we're talking about right now. Like, you can definitely start your sessions with hill sprints because it's good strength work.
Yeah.
But the reason why I bring up all these other types of sprinting is because they don't get that in basketball. Like, all the other types of sprinting is something that we talk about right now. There's calf and there's hamstring. It's an epidemic in basketball right now. But yet we look at the space and the constraint that they constantly live in, and we don't think, oh, maybe we need to do things outside of that. Like, maybe we need to sprint maybe further, like get them in longer spaces, because there is no stress that is a stronger stimuli or puts more load on the body than high velocity sprinting. I cannot recreate those ground force reactions in the weight room. It's impossible. You literally cannot. It's 6 to 8 times body weight on one foot. I can't create that in a weight room. That would be taking 1,000-pound squat on a single leg, on a pistol squat, right? Like, it's just impossible to recreate those forces. Thus, the thing that's going to solve most problems is motor competency, and being able to have a full in spectrum of stress. And what we see in basketball is that it's a lot of quads, it's a lot of adductors, it's a lot of calf, right? And what's being used. Now, as far as what's getting hurt, yeah, it's knees, it's ankles, it's all that, but that's obviously the sport. But when we want to create higher engines or bigger engines to withstand a better suspension system, maybe you got to go build that bigger engine and you got to get on the track and do that.
Quick break to give you this exciting announcement. Jamal from Ohio just reached out. He's 5'8". Before starting Good Drills, I was touching mid-net. After the first 9 steps and 2 days of phase 1 Good Drill system, I am tipping rim. Wow. And then we got Tony from Cincinnati. Before I started, I was only touching net, but now I'm touching backboard. I'm very proud because I'm only 5'7". If you're looking for results like this, get on the Good Drill app immediately. Link in description.
When we do stuff on the court, you're talking about constraints, and why doing like the low throughs fast is insanely good is because it's the situations that they're in. It's a highly compromised situation, and we're ramping it up with speed once they're efficient at it. Like, there's certain players that come to our gym, it's like if we say, all right, low throughs as fast as you can, or put them in a situation to do it as fast as they can, they would just lose the ball. So it's like for the players that are ready and they are doing it, that's amazing, because now it's like, all right, we want to have this constraint-based thing that's happening, and we want to do it in a semi-specific way to hit the demands that we want to hit. The thing that we get in our realm is you're never going to do that in a game. It's like, oh, you're never going to do that in a game. Why would you do that? Why would you do a broad jump into a finish? You're never going to do that in a game, and in all aspects. So it's like we'll do drills where like, all right, players are carrying the ball. Like they'll carry the ball. Oh, carry. It's like like you're never going to do that in a game, but it's like if you want to be able to eventually do something in a game, you're going to have to do something, and then you get better, and then you're going to get better and be able to do something in the game. Oh, you're never going to do a 360 layup. It's like, what does that give you? What are the things that are happening here? And I think if I'm speaking to strength coaches and skill coaches and like where those two worlds meet, putting players in situations and saying, how would Shai Gilgeous-Alexander respond in this drill right now? Okay, now how are you responding, and what's the difference there? Like, how are the best athletes, like what is your future self? What would they do in this situation? They would be a lot better. They'd be able to handle this a lot better. They would do it more proficiently. They would execute. They would be successful if it's a drill finishing around the rim, whatever it is, a competitive drill. Like, how would they do it? And it's like, okay, you can't do that. Like, let's work on that. Let's get after that a little bit.
I mean, that's the same as the weight room, right? Like, no one's ever going to pull from the ground, right? Like, as a deadlift.
There's no weights in the game.
There's certain things that, like, even that argument alone, like, they don't do it in the game. I disagree with wholeheartedly, because that's not the point of the drill. The point of the drill is there's a certain level of expertise that they've already achieved. They can go through layup lines and warm-ups, and with a 99% clip, make a layup. That's great. But the problem is, in a game, a lot of that other stuff comes into play. And that's where your ability to coordinate your body to solve problems at high velocities, that is the next level. So then how do you scale that and do that in skill sessions? And it's exactly what you guys do. And that's the thing that I'm like, it's just so, it's such elementary understanding of what the things that can come from that. Because these are also the same people that say you need to shoot 1,000 jump shots a day to get better at shooting jump shots. And it's like, well, you just got better at shooting jumps shots with a ball passed to you perfectly at your chest, and then you just developed this rhythm, and congratulations, you got 1,000 jump shots in. What I'd rather see is the things that you guys do that's constraint-based, where you're like, you got 100 shots today, okay? 20 are going to be like this, 20 are going to be like that, 10 are going to be like this, and we're just going to stretch your bandwidth of tolerance. And then we're going to probably rather up it if the success rate is too high, or dumb it down if the success rate's too low. But the exposure alone is developing their nervous system. Let's just say that. And it's way more complicated than that. But you're developing their software to be able to handle their hardware. And that's the thing that I find fascinating about that type of stuff, and where it just goes over people's heads so fast where they can't see it in that light. They just see it as silly drills. They just see it as things you won't ever do in a game. And it's like, I promise you, if you do drills based off of things that you think are going to happen in a game, I promise you, you're not going to prepare your athlete.
So something that we talk about a lot is like the environment. So why do we say, okay, you need to be able to go do this because good players do this? And I think about guys like somebody like an Austin Reeves going early to a Lakers Warriors game to go watch Steph Curry before the game, and the picking, you don't see it on TV. That's the problem. And I noticed this because one time I was in a hotel room and the angle of the TV was weird. I was watching a Bucks game, like Dame's first year there, and the angle of the TV was weird, and everybody looked so fast. And then it made me just think about it. I'm like, wait, you can't really tell how fast these guys are most of the time, and everybody looks the same. If you were to watch a high school game on TV, for most people, like, I don't know, everybody kind of looks like a basketball player, and you're just going to play. When you see it up close, though, and when you go compete against them, your context completely changes. You see what they're actually able to do. Even if you can't describe it, you understand, okay, this is the level that they're at. And I think those experiences, because we talk about it all the time, those experiences are what shapes how players train and what they do. And coaches too, coaches and trainers. It's like, I know what these guys would do in this drill. I know what Steph Curry would look like. And just because he shoots with a certain form that you can only describe, the things you can only describe, that doesn't mean that they're the most important things. Just because you see Steph Curry shoot with 10 toes to the rim and his elbow in and he holds his follow through doesn't mean those are the only important reasons why Steph Curry is a good shooter. Like, not even close. It's an arrogant thing to assume. When you're up close, though, and you see Steph Curry compete against other guys and you get that context, now it's like, okay, there's a reason why we're doing pass them the ball 360 before you catch a closeout shot. Like, are you able to do that? Steph Curry would. Like, what are we talking about? But people just don't know, I don't think, because TV is very deceiving. It's very deceiving. You cannot tell what's going on a TV.
No, I was great at going to the gym. Sorry, real quick. I was great at going to the gym and getting up 1,000 reps by myself. I was awesome at that. But now you put me like 1-on-2 trying to get at threes only, right? I would break down. And that's why we do 1-on-2 threes only all the time. I can watch a player get up 1,000 shots and it gives me zero information about who that player is, other than that he's very good at getting 1,000 shots up. He probably has some work ethic. I can see, how fluid is the shot. I can get some type of information. Now I take that same player and I say, okay, you're going 1-on-2. Threes only. So these two players, you're not only double teamed, they know you can't drive to the basket. Think about that amount of pressure. And now I put that player in that situation, 1-on-2 threes only. I'm going to get a lot of information on who that player is, not on their ability to shoot. How do they attack that problem? What process do they go through when they're met with adversity to overcome that adversity? And now I get to really see who these players are and learn about them. And that guides my decision making for future drills or whatever we're going to do with them next. That's all I got.
So two things. One, a stand-up comedian said this, and I thought it was one of the greatest ideas ever. It was, hey, let's take like all the competitors in the Olympics, like during the Olympics, and when they do their event, have one more slot for someone who's average. And then let's say the 100-meter sprint. Let's take like an average person in the world and have them line up with the 100-meter sprinters and then sprint. And then you would see really quick, like TV don't lie on that one. Right, you would understand that there's such a difference between elite, whether it's athletic or basketball quality, and not elite. And I think people have this misconception of how fast these guys really are, how strong they really are, how skillful they really are. And then on the second note, here's going to always be the problem with the eye that we're talking about. There's no objective way to truly scale it and say this had this much increase on that drill. So for example, if we lift weights 3 sets of 5, then bump it up to 5 sets of 5 and they get stronger, I can objectively say they got, from 400 pounds to 500 pounds stronger. Awesome. With force plates, I can say height has gotten this, reactive strength index has got that, concentric impulse is this. I can objectively say what you're talking about is, yeah, you get 5,000 shots up. That's the objective piece. They got 5,000 shots up. And then whatever ratio that they hit that percentage goes, that's how much better shooting they got. But then you introduce them into the game and the game doesn't say that. Now, what you're talking about, and this is why you guys are probably getting so much flack, is when you set them up in these scenarios, it looks silly, it looks rushed, it looks super competitive and fun, but there's no objective way to go, they got that much better. And that's why people have such a problem with seeing this as advantageous. Now, of course, I'm on your side. I agree with you guys wholeheartedly in how you do this. My question to you guys is, other than the game, which is obviously the most important thing, how do you know when to scale objectively?
Yeah, I just want to use this opportunity. I say this word all the time, this phrase. I say, what would I put my money on? When you don't always know, it's like, what would you put your money on? It's like, okay, you're kind of accepting you don't have all the answers. It's not objective. You can't quantify skill. You can't quantify how good somebody is, even in a game like you're saying, because there's ups and downs, and it's not a straight line up to, oh, I'm a Division I player now. That's not how it works. It's not scales like that. But what would you put your money on? Would you put, and if you see it, somebody standing in the corner shooting threes, or somebody, next one, somebody standing in the corner has a closeout and they're more engaged. You see it on their face. You see it on their freaking face. You see it in their eyes. They are more engaged. They are more attuned to what's going on. Another thing that is a little bit more objective and I think merit-based when it comes to training is what's the feedback, the subjective feedback from parents? Like what are they saying? Like, I think that is so underrated. They have no idea what they're talking about by any stretch of the imagination, except that they could see it on their kid's face that they are engaged and they're in a good place. They could see that. So it's like, what is the merit-based things that we're talking about? I think that can't go like out the window. I think that's huge. If somebody comes and then they go back and they keep going and they tell everybody else about it, that is something that, okay, like there's something there. There's something that you're doing there. Besides that, I think it's not possible. That's my take. I don't think it is possible to say, okay, you got better at this. And we like making stuff up like that. Like, here's are the different levels for this type of set. Okay, we're going to do thing like touch around the rim. Here's the different levels to do it. We like thinking that, okay, here's some ways that we could scale this and quantify it and progress it. But you don't, because you're going to miss that little chippy in the game, even if you got to the final level of our progression. Like, it doesn't matter. And it's also day-to-day changes.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's the part that without motion capture, it's going to be really, really, really hard to see why it's impactful. And that's why I think it's so cool that you guys are on this, I would say, we'll call it ground level. Okay. But I think 10 years from now, all of a sudden, there's going to be a lot of validity and there's going to be a lot of objective measures to say why this constraint-based approach is doing, or this constraint-based approach is helping athletes more so than what you see in traditional drill sets.
Also, I don't think our goal is to prove it. Like, it's not I'm not thinking about, we like these conversations with people that are other people in the field, but it's like at some point there was like, oh, how am I going to show this? Like, what if I got into a conversation with somebody and I needed to be able to say, oh, this is objectively why this is better. There was a point my brain hasn't went there in so long. I'm just so focused on the person in front of me. And then I just say, like, what would I put my money on? What would I do? What would I put my money on? I really care about this person succeeding and I know a lot. It doesn't matter if I could prove it, not prove it. It's like, let's see, I'll see you in 4 years. Like, let's see. Like, you come every single day for 4 years. I'll see you in 4 years. And it's like, are you happy or are you not happy at the end of it?
I mean, that sounds really good. The problem is when you have everyone else, like if you work in professional sports or you work in college sports, you don't get that freedom that you're talking about, which is cool because you get to be on the frontier of expanding whatever you want to do because you have high volume and you have basically, I mean, of course you got guys that are paying or whatever they're doing, but you're not in a situation where you have 2 to 3 year window. And if it doesn't even go great year one, you're out.
I get it.
That's the difference where, and it's like at some point there with technology, we'll be able to say how you can scale it, what's quantifiable, what's meaningful. And I think that's really cool because you guys are laying down the groundwork of what it looks like. Then you add technology and then we can layer in what we consider this efficiency piece. And that's where I think it's going to be really, really cool.
It's funny you talk to us about laying groundwork and we're talking about constraints-led approach. We never say constraints-led approach. Like, we won't say it, right? We'll have a conversation with you and talk about it, but you'll never see in any of our content constraints-led approach. For me, it's like, I don't want to be lumped into anything. Where you're talking about being part of an organization, like that's what I mean. I don't want to be part of any 3-letter organization, anything. I am putting out things that this is what we do. This is how I do. I'm not here to defend it. I'm not here to clarify it. I'm not here to, I'll have these conversations with you, but I'm posting good drills. Follow me, right? That's all I'm doing. right? And was your original question, you asked us a question, was like, how do we know when to scale?
No, it's just objectivity. Like, when do you feel like the point, I'll rephrase it. Like, when do you think there is the point of having something objective that is scalable? And guys, like, we know your environment, but the other listeners you have don't have that environment. Like, it's very rare to have what you guys have going. So my question is, other than adopting good drills, like, I'm talking like philosophical, or how do you drop this into the 3-letter organizations or 4-letter organizations for an NCAA, NBA? Like, how do you do it?
I think it's
like,
happening though a little bit. It's
is,
starting
dude,
to a little bit.
Yes,
Yeah.
we just had Sarama on from the Cavs a couple weeks ago.
Dude, he's the best. He's the best.
And how did he get
I
that
get to
job?
talk to him pregame.
I think that's the question, right?
Yeah. I mean,
you're-
not that how did he get the job? Is like, how is he executing it now that he's there?
But the first part, I think, is how did he get there? Like, so it's like when it talks about objectiveness and proving it, and like you have to be able to share it because of real life scenarios. Like, you're trying to get a job, you're trying to keep your job, like all that. So it's like, how did he get there?
Putting stuff on the internet. That's how he got there.
Well, yeah, good. Yeah, he put stuff on the internet.
Yeah.
But it's like it's a subjective call. You trust him, and it's like he's saying things that are rational. And did he go up to the interview with a whole like a data sheet on shit? Like, I doubt it. I think like there's some things that he said, okay, this is the general direction of the research that I read. This is my expertise. I understand what you guys are currently doing, but I would put my money on it that this is better. And can you, like, I don't know.
I don't think he sold it like that. I think they found him, or they
They
found
did.
each other.
They reached out to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you said something very important in there. You said he looks at the research. So, guys, we're artists. I get it. But at some micro level, it has to come down to, it's got to be embedded in science or physiology in some form or fashion. And the motor learning and skill acquisition space is becoming more and more objective, and they're getting better and better technologies. So, alluding to what you're saying, I'm telling you guys, like, I'm trying to give you guys a lot of credit for laying down this idea that it's getting more accepted because, man, it's out there more.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm so excited about, because I'm like, great, now let's throw that in front of high-speed cameras. Let's throw that and scale it with all this data that we can collect from Hawkeye. Like, these are the things that I'm not saying it in like like, I don't know what it is way. I'm saying is, like, no, I think it's phenomenal, because the greatest things that have happened in all of human performance were all anecdotal. It was not that it started in research. No, it was guys that were putting out great stuff or getting great results anecdotally. And then research came along and said, oh, let's validate it. And I think we're in this precipice right now where it's becoming more mainstream. I'm not just sorry to put a tag on it like constraint-based, but the reality is
that's it. Yes.
Right. But what I'm trying to say is, like, this is now becoming not mainstream, but it's becoming more accepted. And you're starting to not just see kids doing it. You're starting to see the best in the world do it. And now it went from individually the best in the world doing it to now teams are adopting it. Like, that's why I get excited about this.
No, by no means do I view how you were responding in any way as like 100%. I understand completely what you're saying, where you're coming from. And also I think that there is already a good amount of research around motor learning that goes semi-ignored, like I would feel it goes like semi-ignored. That shows like a lot of different things that are like some pretty specific things too. But I do think, my butt to that is, I do think at some point people are going to realize that, as an example, NBA players get really good because they're around other NBA players all day long. At some point, I think people are going to understand that. And whether, like, you could already do research on that. Like, let's look at every piece of data that we could possibly look at by the time somebody enters the NBA, and then 5 years down their line, or 2 years, 1 year, whatever, and see what the hell is going on. I guarantee you they're getting better at a faster rate. And if I had to put my money on it at this second, what is the best thing that you could do for somebody? You put them in the environment in which will allow them to fully reach that potential, which is put them around other savages and other really good players, and they'll get good.
This is what I'm telling parents now. So when their kids come in, they're high-level New Jersey State basketball players. I said, our biggest value prop is this. And I point to all the other kids in the gym. I was like, this is what we have. This. And your son's going to come here, and we're going to compete. We're going to throw different problems at him over and over and over again. Talking about scalability, for me, I'm really into the level of engagement. I was talking to one of my a younger trainer that's starting to work with us right now, and anybody can present the drills. Anybody can come up with the constraints. Anybody can manipulate it. But I know when I step on the floor and I'm working with these athletes, a freaking mechanism goes off in my head, and I become immersed in what's happening, where I'm not just saying, here, go do this. Right? These are the rules, go play. I am like completely in tune with that environment. I am part of that organism. I've got players going, but I am entrenched in it. And the second I see a dip in engagement, or I feel a feeling that doesn't feel right, I make a change. Okay, we're playing to 3. They get to 1. I'm bored. Let's move on. Now we're going to the corner, and I can just orchestrate this freaking thing the way I want it based on the level of engagement and feelings that I'm getting. And body language from the players, but it's just constant. It's variable after variable. It's problem after problem. And the progression is just stimulus on top of stimulus to different stimulus, more stimulus, less stimulus. But I get to dictate that, where it's not about technique. I'm a big nature guy. I wanted to comment on this. Big nature guy, huge nature guy. I hunt, I travel, I spend a lot of time outdoors. Where in nature do we see animals develop their like animals develop their children like we develop our children? It's nowhere. They're not a freaking giraffe is not teaching a baby giraffe how to walk and where to put his feet and how to work his long neck, right? They have a long neck so they can get the freaking leaves at the top of the tree, right? We have completely lost that. Or most have completely lost that. And I think guys like you, guys like Sarama, a lot of the other guests we have on are now bringing it back to that nature, right? We need to, what Ross is talking about, what's the nature there? You're putting a savage amongst savages. Right? That is the best you can do. Now, how do you scale that? Right? Okay, you're just learning how to play basketball. Get around some people that are just learning to play basketball. It's not going to be as aggressive. I can speak very aggressively and get passionate like I am in this conversation. And, I love working with those freaking elite kids that are hungry, that want to compete at the highest level. But I have a 2.5-year-old daughter at home. Is it going to be like that with her? Is it going to be like, all right, I did daddy-daughter gymnastics, for a couple months, and she was good with that. And now she's 2.5, and I can put her with the 21-year-old girl that's running the class and put her off. And that's the transition. That's how we scale it. Okay, she did really good with this happened on Monday. We bring her to gymnastics with, and for the first time, it wasn't daddy with her in gymnastics. It was some 21-year-old girl leading gymnastics. We scaled it. My daughter did great. I'm like shocked because I would have flipped out and, hugged my mom's, leg and cried. But my daughter handled that well. Okay, we did that once a week. What's next? What's next? What's next?
To rebuttal that, though, the giraffe comment, the giraffe isn't trying to race. The giraffe isn't trying to race.
No.
Also, look at all the things that
what does that have to do with what I said?
So you're saying so the idea that it's like, okay, the giraffe doesn't have to teach the other giraffe.
A cheetah.
But so cheetah to cheetah.
I picked a weird animal. I picked a giraffe.
Cheetah to cheetah. Okay, yeah. A cheetah to cheetah, like you would need to teach a cheetah probably to do what a giraffe does. And then you would need to teach a giraffe. Like, so here's my point here. I'm bringing this back.
I'm waiting.
Kid that we were talking about yesterday, right? Saying he wants to play at this school, and he's getting all this information from people, and there's a reason why he is saying what he's saying that goes beyond what he wants. It goes beyond what he wants. He's trying to fulfill something that he thinks that he should be fulfilling. It's like you might not be a cheetah. You might not be that cheetah. So it's like putting you in that environment. You might not be that. That might not be you. So it's like, all right, if that's not you, all right. Now we gotta think about this a little bit. How are we gonna put this together in the most conscious way possible to make you look like a cheetah as much as possible?
I think my point was more about the communication.
Yeah.
We're the only people that communicate in terms of technique and form and drills, where everywhere else in nature it is based on survival.
Don't you feel like animals can learn a lot from us, though?
What?
What do you mean learn from us? Hold on. I'm gonna do y'all all a favor real quick.
Yeah, please help.
Right. So the Mr. Miyagi situation, to the question of why I asked, how do you objectively scale it? You guys answered it. You dictate it by upscaling the environment. It's not did the ball go in? Did they do this one metric thing? Did they put their foot here? No, you did it by you made the environment harder, or you change the factor of the environment that allows more to happen. And this is the part that I appreciate so much about guys like us. Now, I've not put so much out there lately. My goal is to soon enough, but we put a lot out on social. You guys put out a lot on social. And the thing that you guys do is you're not afraid to share everything that you do. Just the same as me. I will give you our exact sets and rep schemes, but no one can do it the way I do it because of the environment that I set, because of my personality, because of the relationships that I build, and because of the way I have constructed this room that's going to allow me to get the most intense out of this situation. And that's what I'm really happy that I heard how that conversation transitioned from, well, we're focused on this objectivity aspect to, no, you can scale it. And it is scalable, but the scale is in the complexity or the environment where it's different people, or it's a constraint of you're jumping off a bleacher to jump so that you can get more of a reactive strength index to jump going up to the rim. That's the thing that I appreciated the most about this evolution. Now, how the hell we got to the animals and stayed with the animals, that was a little different. That was the part that I was like, that's the answer. The answer is you scale it by just turning the heat up in the environment or in the room.
And then
that's
you become a giraffe and you're eating leaves next to a cheetah, and then we got it all solved.
Yeah. And then Bobby goes hunting.
Yeah.
So, Cory, I know back in the day you used to train for mostly aesthetics while you were an athlete. My question to you is, how does a strength program look different from a hypertrophy program? I know this could be like a 3-hour podcast, but like a rapid fire answer, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. In a hypertrophy program, you're truly just changing the muscles to be bigger. And the difference between that is and performance is you don't want the muscles to necessarily be bigger. You want them to create more force.
But practically, how would that look in a weight room? Like if I'm training for that?
Oh, yeah. Volume. Volume is the number one answer. The things that I would use in bodybuilding, like typically you would think is all just machines. But I'll be honest with you, the more and more I'm in high performance, the more I'm starting to use machines like bodybuilders. The only difference is it's just the volume and how you structure the workouts.
You've been coaching college for so long, you're in the NBA now, but what have you noticed from within the locker room that has changed from your days at Santa Clara to Texas?
Yeah, I mean, money is the real thing, and it's just free agency. So there's no loyalty, which I don't think that's a good or a bad thing. Like it just depends. It's all context specific. I love the idea that athletes are getting paid. I think that's right on par. I think that's accurate. I think they got a lot to figure out, though, like a whole lot to figure out. But as far as like team buy-in and how I worked on a daily basis, it wasn't different. It wasn't different at all.
Cory, thanks for taking the time. You're always welcome back on the show, and talk soon.
Hey, looking forward to it, fellas, and I appreciate
Where can we
y'all.
find you? On social media and everywhere else?
Yeah, Instagram, /strength, SCHLES strength. I will begin posting again. I've been very silent over the past year, but I'll be back.
I see some good pictures going out.
Yeah, that's about it. That's laziness.
Where you at with your products?
Oh man, I got a bunch of stuff. Equipment, I'm still working on that. Got courses that are available now. And then I got some stuff cooking, and I'm really excited to announce it'll probably be in a couple months, but I got some stuff cooking.
Let us know, and we'll put all those links below in the description.
That's love. Appreciate it, fellas.
Bobby out, Ross out, Cory out. We're out. Talk soon.
See ya.